Mattel, aka the company that many people in the Thomas & Friends community have associated with destroying the Thomas & Friends brand. Now, a lot of people have been led to wonder, how can a company that has been around for, I kid you not, literally as long as Thomas the Tank Engine himself, fuck up this badly when it comes to running this property? What if I were to tell you, though, a lot of the dumb choices that they made, especially with the merchandise, weren't exactly as stupid as we thought? Of course, were they justified? Well, no, not in a million years. But what if there was a lot more to it? I'm Troublesome Junction, and on this episode of The Milk Tank, we're going to be covering what I call the Mattel Thomas & Friends conspiracy. Now, for legal reasons, of course, and just to kind of preface this, nothing in this video is 100% fact. This is just a little food for thought, something to get people more engaged with the fandom, and just to get people thinking. Because with this reboot out, God knows we need something to do now. So I'm going to be covering a lot of things talking about the toy line in particular. Only going to be covering the Diecast line and then the Wooden Railway line. Sorry about you Trackmaster fans, but guess it's just not as interesting when it comes to having interesting little tidbits. But without further ado, let's get into this. Now, starting off where the origins of the Diecast line for this video, we're going to be talking about the Take-Along line. This line right here gave shape to the Diecast toys to come. The body was all die-cast. The earlier models had metal boilers, but they did change to plastic later on. But the shape was overall still consistent with Thomas. Next thing that came along was this variant of Thomas, and then followed by the full-on CGI variant. The one, as you can see on screen, is of course the one that kind of tries to blend and hit a middle ground between this guy and this guy. But in all honesty, I think it failed. Now, you might be wondering why I don't have a physical model here, is because the only one that I had, I completely trashed him. But we went from this guy to this guy in the middle here, and there really aren't many changes, as you can see. They still stuck relatively consistent to these guys. This guy right here is basically identical to the early version of it, except the fact that they did downsize a lot of things, cut a couple of corners, such as giving pinwheel axles rather than giving the more sturdy, thicker wheels. And then if you can feel by the two of these, this guy feels surprisingly lighter. So I'm assuming what they did for the innards is that they used a much thinner material overall, whereas on this Thomas here, this thing feels durable, like it's meant to last. This definitely does feel like a lighter alternative to this, but as we can still see here, the detail does remain consistent. This is the first example of one of Mattel's corner cutting methods, but I'd say for the better. These things, if you huck these things across the room, they're bound to break something. These things were definitely very heavy, but I do think that this change to a much lighter alternative for being a children's toy was a much needed thing. But as you can see here, the detail is still relatively consistent overall. So there's really nothing to say about this. But with all things with Mattel, we know that once they have a good thing going, they have to find some way to mess it up.
Whoa! Ew! What the fuck? What the fuck?
Bringing in what is affectionately called the Take and Play 2.0, these guys right here were a much simplified version of these guys right here. A lot of the engines got this treatment of getting the squash cab, the bigger sides, and then these stupid, horrendous, oversized, simplified magnets. This right here was an awful product and generated a lot of buzz from the community and from kids alike. They were wondering what happened to these guys. These guys had magnets on them that where you could connect characters back to back, front to front, double backs. Any way you wanted, you could join these guys. These are what were affectionately called the smart magnets. But with the Take and Play 2.0, you could only connect them one way. It was a very strange choice, not to mention the fact that they were definitely cheaper because the magnets were very prone to corrosion. If I bring here one that's new in box, you can see what it looks like when it's first in package versus this is, I kid you not, almost 1 year after I took it out of package. These things were not meant to last. And if you go on the second-hand market, chances of you finding these guys with shiny magnets is very unlikely. They just were not meant to last. They were cheaply made, poorly manufactured, and there wasn't a lot of thought put into them. It also didn't help in the fact that the squashed cabs and the weird proportions relative to what it came before with this guy were a big downgrade. A lot of people complained about it, but there were some people who tried to give out hope and say that, well, maybe one of the reasons why they had this detail was to be compatible with wooden railway engines. I say to those people this: as you can see here, these two do not connect at all the right way they're supposed to. They connect all topsy-turvy. So, my question is this: for the people who were defending this, saying that it might have been for cross-compatibility, why would they make it so that you could only connect the engines backwards? Not to mention the fact that they don't run on the same gauge track in the first place. This is where my issues come in with this. I feel that they knew this was a bad product. They knew that this was going to have a lot of people bent the wrong way. It was awfully long, the proportions were way too squashed, the magnets were just awful as a whole, it was not compatible with anything. So, bring in the much beloved Thomas Adventures. Here's why I think that they wanted this for a reason. I feel the entire purpose of Adventures was to get rid of the magnets as a whole, to have a new step forward, but not to mention the fact of switching over the body shells, having that gradual change of saying, oh, this one's so bad, but we went from an F- to a C. It's still pretty mediocre, but it's an improvement. I feel that Mattel didn't want people to remember this right here. I feel that they wanted people to focus so heavily on this right here of how bad it was, so people would complain about it and say, do better, to give us this. This right here was the Thomas Adventures line, which is, in my opinion, has the definitive Thomas and Friends coupling system. I feel that this right here was a ploy to, one, justify the use of the confined squashed cab, but to also get rid of the magnets. I'll get more onto this later. And the reason I say this is because why would they include these little notches right here on this magnet right here? All of the characters from this line have these weird little notches on the coupling system right here. These are meant to be used for the adapters that join this guy right here to the Adventures couplings. If they supposedly didn't have any idea that they would be dropping the magnets altogether, then why would they include this? As mentioned in a video done by Dieselworks123, he pointed out the fact that coinciding with Take and Play in the US, over in Europe, there was the Collectible Railways line, which basically was Thomas Adventures before Thomas Adventures. And you might be wondering, well, what does that have to do with anything? Notice how with the Collector series, it wasn't released anywhere else besides in Europe and Asia. It was a very limited release, a way to test a test audience, if you will. Because once you release something to America, especially where I'd say the consumers are the biggest in terms of, especially Thomas and Friends, which has one of the biggest markets, if you have a product that fails, you're done. There's no coming back from that typically. So they wanted to release the Collectible Railway line in Europe to see, okay, well, do people like this? Are they interested in it? It coincided with, of course, the Take and Plays, but this was still an option over there, just to test the waters. But then it slowly shifted over into, oh, well, you guys said you don't like the magnets anymore. Oh no, look guys, we did better. We fixed it. He's not long and stupid anymore. Oh, this guy who had the better body shell and everything. No. He didn't happen. Focus on this guy right here. We did better. We went from an F to a C. As crazy as that sounds, I do believe the fact that this was their intended idea behind Adventures was to completely get rid of the magnets, but to gradually build up to that. Because as mentioned before, going from these kinds of body shells where they're nicely detailed and transferring over to this all of a sudden, lack of details, no magnets at all, is a very drastic change and probably would make adventures more hated and not wanted. But if you give it to a limited line that people are going to hate regardless because of how bad it is, when you upgrade to something like this, people are going to be more accepting of it. A fun comparison that I like to make typically is the Sonic movie. Because if you remember back with the original Sonic design, everyone hated it. But when it came with all of that hate, everyone had eyes on the movie. It was basically free promotion. Bad press is still good press for companies. When you get people talking about how bad toys are, people are going to look and say, this is shit, do better. So in a way, they basically got their marketing, mainly from people complaining on Twitter, people making YouTube videos, and it had a lot of eyes on these lines. I think I've gotten my point across with that. But then we went from the short-lived adventures up to these guys right here. Now this right here, I know I kind of hyped up this being the end result, but I feel that this is what Mattel really wanted to do. They have a shortened body shell. They have a Trackmaster coupling system, increasing compatibility. And now they have a way to justify the fact of, oh, look, guys, these guys connect. They're compatible now. So it's okay that we went from this to this. I feel that this was a way to outlaw the magnets and make this the fresh reboot, the one that people start buying. But Adventures, unfortunately, was very short-lived, and they upgraded to Trackmaster Push-Along. This right here was one of Mattel's absolute powerhouses in terms of they pushed it so heavily with marketing. Yeah, you remember the cutie patootie little adventures that, you know, the fandom really learned to like because they fixed some of the problems? Yeah, fuck those savings. This is your new norm now, damn it. Buy them. So if you were to line up the Thomas guys all together, of course, I don't have the weird hybrid CGI Thomas, but when you go from Take Along to the hybrid CGI Thomas to this guy, it's that gradual integration, saying that, you know, hey, we're gonna cut corners here, but it's still like this guy. Hey, we're gonna cut corners here, but hey, this guy is still like this guy. And then, once people got accepted with those and said, okay, well Mattel got their foot comfortable. They were okay with, okay, these guys are quite used to the downsizing. Let's really hit them with a ring dinger. And we get this. The Thomas item that they knew would flop. The Thomas item that they knew people wouldn't like. A Thomas item that was quick and cheap to shovel out to fill in space before adventures. Once again, another way to get people not used to the change in the couplings, get used to the new body shell. Starting from this, they say, oh, you guys don't like this? It's so bad? All right, then, let's upgrade it. So they went from an F- to a C+ right here. Body shell is, of course, still the same, but of course the nicely improved magnets. And then we get the final result here, which is what I feel what they wanted the entire time. They wanted an item that was compatible with one of their most popular lines, being the Trackmaster. You can connect them, they ride on the same tracks, and everything. I can't couple it up right now because I'm being a fucking idiot. There we go. So as that happens right there, you can just see the fact that it feels like there was a lot more to this than just, oh, we're just so incompetent, whoopsie doopsie doo. And the crazy thing is, this isn't the only time we have seen this trend. Clearing these guys out, we're going to talk about another line right here, which I would say has the fandom's heart the most. Thomas Wooden Railway. This line, of course, started out in the 80s and 90s by Learning Curve, and then gradually changed over time till we got it under Mattel's hands. Now, unfortunately for this portion of the video, I'm going to have to use pictures because most of the ones that I have are either put in storage or I don't have them anymore. So we go from, of course, the Learning Curve era of Thomas, not this guy, of course. We go from this Thomas right here to this Thomas right here, which was still carried by Tomy at the time when they had sold off the company, but then early on held by Mattel. They still had this weird hybrid CGI faces. Very similar to another line that we are very familiar with that did the same concept. After that, we get the normal CGI Thomas line, Once again, not many changes, just improving it. The wood is, of course, a little different, a little cheaper than what we were used to with Learning Curve, but hey, it was still Thomas Wooden Railway, it was still good products. This Thomas right here is what people would describe as the definitive Wooden Railway Thomas with a CGI face, and I agree with them. Then we get this guy. What the fuck were they thinking? This guy right here took an existing Thomas, but just did this sudden change without provoke and without talking about it, just switched it. Gave it a smaller face. It felt like a much cheaper plastic and an overall worse design. It came in towards the very end of the Wooden Railway line. And here comes what really got me thinking about this theory the most. Thomas Wood. We went from having these painted engines to looking nice, to looking cool, to this right here. Now this right here, I would say, was Mattel's most controversial thing that they have done. Even more so than giving us the dumbed down magnet designs, which still don't work with this thing, whatever. We went from having the painted engines to these guys. This is awful. And you have to just look at this. This toy company that has been around for just as long as Thomas, over 70 years, managed to shit this out knowing that the Thomas Wooden Railway line was so treasured by both fans and children. And don't tell me that they didn't know, because then explain the Thomas Creator Collective, which emphasized a lot of their Thomas lines. A lot of Wooden Railway stuff got shown in that, and it was always something that people said were, yep, that looks good, that looks great. I would say that more cameos and appearances were made from the Wooden Railway segments than all of the other ones. So we ended up with this guy. The wooden, painted nice guys got the boot, and we were left with this. A lot of fans complained and bitched about this thing to no end. Once again, Mattel taking an okay product right here that people were okay with and releasing a shit product out of nowhere, unprovoked. So this begs the question of, what was their next step after this? After so many people complained about this on the internet, on Twitter, the sales weren't doing well, what happened? We got this right here. This right here was the final result of what Mattel had wanted for this line. They didn't think that this was gonna last. They knew this was shit. Anyone with brain cells can look at this. When you're going from this to this, it's no competition that people are going to complain about it. It's awful inherently. So Mattel said, oh, you guys don't like this line? Oh, we're sorry, we're gonna go through and fix it. We totally didn't have this guy planned from the get-go. And you might be wondering, well, that sounds completely ridiculous. Why would they go through the lengths of doing that in the first place? And I have the perfect reason of why. Now, the answer to why Mattel would change their product so much comes from this guy, a little bit of this guy, and then, of course, this guy. These guys all have one thing in common, and no, it's not the fact that they have compatible coupling systems. It's their paint job. So, with the Thomas Minis line, this is where it all completely started. As you can see here, it has this very rough-looking, printed-on paint. It looks like a printer just ran over this and just printed it on. So for now on, we're going to call this the printed-on printer detail. So as you can see here, that very rough paint, you can especially see it by the window. This paint was clearly printed on, it's not clear coated, and it has that finish on it. These guys right here, as well as these guys right here, also utilize that detail. Notice how with a lot of the take and play and the adventure stuff, a lot of the detail was very much so prone to being scraped off. As you can see, I think with this Thomas the most with the red lining there, you can see that, there it goes. You can see, once again, very similar to the Thomas Mini, it has that weird roughness like that printer detail. Starting to make some connections here, aren't we? Now this guy right here, I think because it is a newer one, but you can still kind of see it. I think they did go over and start clear coating these guys later on. So it's not as noticeable as earlier ones, but it's definitely still there. You can kind of see it there. On the red lining is where I mainly like to point it out. But once again, printer detail. This guy right here was a little Thomas introductory line. You can see it the most on these guys. Printer detail, not clear coated. You can easily scrape it off like that. So you can see with the detail, it has that weird printer-esque finish, like someone just went. And here's where I'd say it's the most noticeable side by side with the Thomas Mini. You can see there that very rough outline detail with the lining, the mud splatters. It all looks like that printer detail. You can see up here, there's actually a little bit of an error up there. As you can see right there, it has that weird printer-esque paint. And if you feel a lot of these Trackmaster models, you can still feel the paint. It doesn't feel like it's been clear coated at all. But that right there is what they wanted out of this stuff right here. As you can look at, especially with this guy too, and even on the newer ones, they use this kind of weird printer type of paint where they just print on the details on the side rather than having it hand painted individually. It looks like it's just done in one go by some kind of big industrial machine. So what I assume what happened up at Mattel is that this was their new way of detailing their Thomas line and some of their other lines simultaneous. I think it also applies with Hot Wheels too. I feel that what they did with these guys, this guy's over here, I feel that it was mainly because of coupling systems and downsizing the metal, but simultaneously, the paint was a big factor. They wanted all of their lines to conform to using these big printers to print on their detail like this. So over time, they gradually went from having this nicer detail to this much more gritty printer looking detail. They, rather than have it so that, oh, all of these lines use it, but you don't, they wanted to find a way to give these guys smoother surfaces so it's easier and more compatible to print on. As you can see with all of this lining here, you can see it right there, how it has that kind of like it's been printed off in layers look to it. Like it just went boop, 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 boop. I don't know exactly what kind of printer or machine that they use to get this detail on there, but it's very evident that the type of way that they print on all of this detail is uniform across all of their main lines. Not you anymore because you're kind of sort of dead, but you get the point. I feel that with these guys, they wanted that to happen for all of them to be uniform in paint, of course, with especially Wood and Railway because it is the outcast out of all of them. But this guy, I feel, was much more interesting in the fact that, yeah, they wanted it to have that form of detail, but they also wanted to cut down on the costs for metal and still wanted it to be compatible. No more magnets, that cuts out metal and more expenses, cutting out the fact that they don't have as much metal in the detail in the cab, so we get the squash cab design, saves the money there. You get the picture. So that's my big conspiracy on why I feel that Mattel knew about all of this stuff. But with the case of Icarus, I feel that they realized they flew too close to the sun. All of these downsizes of our beloved properties, from these guys to a bit of Trackmaster going from Trackmaster Classic to Trackmaster 2, and especially Wood and Railway. This right here, I feel, was the straw that broke the camel's back when fans started to realize you can't keep downsizing. You need to learn your lesson that we're not going to buy this stuff. We aren't going to support this stuff. And I really do feel that Mattel really did have a wake-up call after they flew too close to the sun with this case. Because now we're getting all of the really good merchandise of the CGI Thomas line. And even the Wood and Railway line, which no one in a million years thought that we'd go from this to this. The stuff that fans have been clamoring about for years with that kind of stuff. I'll kind of keep this section short, but a lot of the things that fans were clamoring about they wanted. More wheels on the Wood and Railway engines, different facial expressions for the Wood and Railway engines. And once again, it does look like, for the most part, they're using this similar kind of printing rough detail to paint their engines. So they found that middle ground of, one, they're able to be compatible with the same printing technology as these guys, but two, appeasing fans in a way of, yeah, we fucked up, we're kind of sorry about that. I wish you could say the same thing about the TV series, but it's still very apparent that Mattel is making an effort to change things. You can see it with the CGI Thomas & Friends Trackmaster stuff, hell, even with the new Thomas & Friends All Engines Go line. I said it once and I'll say it again. The show is complete ass, but the merchandise is fucking amazing. You cannot tell me and look at this thing and say, oh, they didn't try. They didn't try and make it one-to-one. They're giving them unique facial expressions. They're giving them all of the detail possible, and it's still conforming to this same printer press technology. This right here is what I feel Mattel is their wake-up call. I feel that this is them trying to say, okay, we realize we like money and we're tired of downsizing, so let's give them what they want. I do feel that that right there is the light at the end of the tunnel, and the fact that there are changes being made to the Thomas & Friends line, and we are going to see them for ourselves. Just look at all of the changes that they're making to the merchandise. So whenever this new Wooden Railway stuff comes out, if you like it and you want to see Mattel do more of it and never go back to stuff like this, please support it. So we're never in a position where we have to listen to a man-child rant about the Thomas & Friends line saying, coincidence, I think not. That's pretty much all I gotta say for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this probably gets a lot more people thinking about this topic, just kind of gets more speculation. If you have any questions about things or if there's lack of clarity, drop it down in the comments below. I'll be sure to respond. And that's all I gotta say, so I'll see you guys on the flip side.